Visit us at Eduvvo. Thank you for calling Eduvvo.
To change the appearance of that, and with that I don't mean the date, we'll take care about that separately, but to change the overall appearance, we have to learn a bit more about how styling in Flutter works. We already did some basic styling. We, for example, set a background color on that card here at the top, but how could we style this a bit more? For that, you have to understand that styling in Flutter works entirely through the arguments you pass to your widgets. If you have a web development background, you are used to using CSS, cascading style sheets, for styling. That is basically an extra programming language. In quotes, it's not really a programming language, but doesn't matter. It's an extra programming language which you can use to tell the browser how to style certain elements on the page. And it's only loosely connected to HTML, which is the structure of your page, the programming language with which you describe which elements you have on the page. In Flutter, there is no such separation. You don't have a separate styling language or anything like that. You style widgets through the arguments they take. And you have a lot of flexibility there. And if a certain widget doesn't take a certain argument, if you can't give a column a background color, for example, indeed you can't, then you always have to use another widget and wrap the widget which you want to style with it. So for example, if you want to give that price here, that amount here, let's say some spacing and a background color, then we can't do this on the row or on the text, but we can do that on the container. We can add space around it with the help of margin, because if you recall that slide I showed you earlier, a container is basically a collection of things. You have the child, the content in the middle, then you have some internal spacing between the border and the child, and some external spacing around the item, so around the border. So here we can add margin to add some spacing. Margin is actually of type edge insets geometry, and you always create margin in Flutter by using edge insets dot, and then you have different ways of creating margin. Margin in all directions, a constructor where you can specify the margin in each direction separately, symmetric margins where you say how much margin you want to have top and bottom and left to right, and that's indeed the margin I will use here. There you say how much margin, and that's now just a number in pixels, you want to have vertically, and let's say that's 10, and then how much margin you want to have horizontally, and let's say that's 15. And if we do that and we save, we now see we have some spacing around that, just like that. You also can, of course, do more. Let's say we want to have a border. Conveniently, the container has a decoration argument. Decoration here takes the decoration class, but actually, and that's something you learn from the docs or, well, from this course, you should use box decoration here, instantiate that, and now that is a class which gives you a lot of crucial arguments to style the decoration and therefore the appearance of that container. Not every widget has a decoration argument. Row, for example, doesn't have one, but the container has. So here, for example, we could now also assign a border. Now a border, again, is not simply a number or anything like that. Here it's instead of type box border. So you could think that you need to type box border and see what that gives you, but actually the general border object is what you want here. And there you have some extra constructors, and all is really useful because that allows you to define a border in all directions. If you just create border as an object like this with the normal constructor, you can specify the border for each side separately if you needed that. So border.all allows us to draw a border around the container in all directions, and you can give that a color. And here I'll just use black. You can give that a width, maybe 2 pixels, and a style. And here you could choose from different styles like dotted and so on. If I auto format this and save this, now we see there's a border around our price. Now actually, some spacing inside of that border would be nice too, and you learned that this could be done with padding. Now not inside of the box decoration, but inside of the container. And again, if you're wondering how I know this, the IDE help with control space and the official docs, and of course resources like this course are your way to memorize this, and then it's always about playing around with these things. Padding, just like margin, takes edge insets objects, objects. So let's add edge insets here. And there I want to have the same padding in all directions, maybe 10. So this is taking shape. We now have a border with our amount in the middle. Maybe we now also want to change the text style, however. The text style can, of course, also be changed. Not on the container, but on the text itself. On the text, if you use Control Space, you see you got a bunch of arguments to configure how that text is rendered. For example, also what should happen if it exceeds the box it's inside. Here, however, I'm interested in the style, which is of type text style. So indeed, you should create a text style object, and now you can configure a lot of stuff about the text. You can set a shadow, you can set the height, and so on. Here, I want to set the font weight, and I'll set that to font weight.bold. Font weight here is a class with a lot of static properties like bold. So we don't instantiate font weight, instead we access .bold like this because it's a static property. Keep in mind, static properties are basically like enums, just that it's not a number with a label, but a more complex value with a label. That value, however, that complex value is then used by the text style in conjunction with the text widget. So you just set this and you get a bold text. You can also change the size, so we can set the font size here maybe to 20. If we do that, it's bigger. Please also note that the surrounding card and container automatically adjusted to the increased size. So by default, that container grows with the content, which is of course good. So now we have this. Let's maybe also fine-tune the color. And for that here on the text, we can go to Style and set the color. And let's set this maybe to purple, which is one of the built-in colors on that colors class. Again, this is a static property on the colors class. Just like font weight, colors acts as a grouping mechanism. And for the container, where I also want to change the border color now, well, we do that here when we set up that border. So I'll change this to purple as well. And now we have that purple box. So this is looking good. Now, as a little exercise, try doing similar style adjustments for your row. I want to make sure that all the items are positioned on the left by default and not centered. You learned about this earlier in this module. And change the text styles there as well. The title should also be bold, a little bit bigger, not as big as the amount, but a little bit bigger regarding the font size. And the date, whilst it still looks ugly, should have a grayish color, so not black, but gray. And it should definitely be smaller than the title here. These are the adjustments I will make in the next lecture. Definitely try it on your own first.